Welcome to Search for Signs. My name is Gary Willing. If this information interests you, please press the like and subscribe button and press the bell for notifications. In this video, I want to read from Benjamin Creme's Master's article again, but this one's entitled God's Representative. And it's on page 115 of A Master Speaks. Whenever man is bereft of hope, seeing no way forward, no way to solve his problems, he sets up an instinctive cry for succor, an appeal to God to help him in his anguish. Thus it was during the war years earlier this century that the travail through which humanity was passing invoked the Christ, called him forth once more into the world. Never before, through all the vicissitudes, has so much depended upon his coming, for never before has man controlled such forces of destruction. Today, the nations are divided as ever. Each claims to be the repository of the world's wisdom, offering men the choice between freedom and justice. How absurd it is that men should be preferred such a choice. Freedom and justice are divine, and that divinity is indivisible. There can be no freedom without justice, no justice bereft of freedom. Shortly, men will be offered the opportunity to end forever this travesty of truth, and so heal the breach between the nations. It requires but the simple realization that all men are divine, and have the same divine right to share in God's gifts and plans. Lacking such realization, men would know no peace. When men see the Christ, they will realize that they are not alone, that God's representative has answered their call and returned to help them. He will remind them of their source in divinity and of their kinship, brothers all. He will place before them the choice for future and exercise his right of counsel. He will outline the steps towards a better life for all, a life more in keeping with the spiritual nature of man. He will teach and lead, and thus change the world through the actions of men. At first, progress may be slow as men grow accustomed to the benefits of change. But in due course, the pace will quicken until all is caught up in a ferment of change. Naught can stop this progress, for it finds its origins in the mind of God. Naught can for long resist the magnet of God's plan. Without doubt, the greatest hindrance to the plan's successful working is the present insecurity of men. They see around them a hostile world, feel threatened on all sides by penury and want. The nuclear threat hangs heavily over all. The counsel of Maitreya will show men that they have nothing to fear but their fear, that a blessed future awaits man if he will but act in his own best interests, that the intention of God is man's greatest good. He will show that men must act to create the world they want, that he comes not to save but to point the way. He will empower all who take upon themselves the burden and joy of service. He will anoint all who share his burden. The upholders of the old sense the danger but fight a losing battle. They seek to strengthen the walls of their citadel in vain. Their ramparts weaken as the tide of justice turns. Their buttresses betray them as men strike out for freedom. Into this turmoil Maitreya has come, to put his divine resources at the service of men. There's a few things that really stuck out for me when I read this. And the first one is how prophetic this line is given the political situation in the United States at this time. But you have to understand that this article was actually written in the late 80s, so nearly 30 years ago. But it says, where is it? They seek they seek to strengthen their walls of their citadel in vain. Now, I don't know if this is necessarily what the master was seeing when he wrote this, but isn't that what Trump's trying to do today? You know, by building the wall that he always talks about. And it really is, and it says, their ramparts weaken as the tide of justice turns. Their buttresses betray them as men strike out for freedom. And as he said earlier in this article, he says freedom and justice are one and the same. Well, the people who are coming here from from Central America and Mexico and so forth, in South America, trying to get into the United States, of course, they're coming here for a better life. Life is not fair. Life is not just, right? And it's set up that way by the rich nations versus the poor nations. And so I can't blame them for what they're doing, because I think if I had half a chance and I was in their shoes, I'd probably strike out and try to get here to live a better life for myself too, right? But again, you know, you can't help but wonder if that's what he was talking about, because it is very, very accurate to what's going on today. But the other thing too is, one, how we see freedom and justice differently. You know, in communist states, they have more of a sense of justice because people have more of their needs met, just a little bit. But yet they give up a lot of their freedom. You know, in the United States, we claim to have a lot of freedom. I don't think there is a lot of freedom in the United States, but we claim to have a lot of freedom in a lot of ways. But there's no justice. And you can't separate it. That's what he was saying, because they're both divine, and you can't divide divinity. So if you're thinking your country has a lot of freedom but no justice, they really don't have freedom either, because you can't have one without the other. And so Maitreya is always saying over and over again, without sharing there could be no justice, without justice there could be no peace. Well, really, looking at it from this perspective, without sharing there could be no freedom. Without freedom and justice there could be no peace, right? I mean, it could really be said the same way. And so when you look at this stuff and when you hear Maitreya on TV, listen to it from that standpoint too. He's talking about our freedom. He's talking about the fact that you can't be free if there's no justice, and you can't have justice if they're not free. So it works both ways, right? And the other thing too is that I think when people finally realize and trust who Maitreya is, I think this line will be very prophetic too. When men see the Christ, they will realize that they are not alone, that God's representative has answered their call and returned to help them. But again, it's not just Maitreya. It's a group of his vanguard. It's a group of his masters that are going to be here to help us as well. And it's also the space brothers, you know, who are flying in and around our atmosphere, helping clean up our atmosphere from all the pollution and nuclear radiation that we emit into the atmosphere on a moment-to-moment basis. But these space brothers are also here living as normal as ordinary people. They're not ordinary people, but they're living like ordinary people out into the world, helping us, steering us away from the abyss from time to time, like they did back during the Cuban Missile Crisis and how they helped in that regard. But we'll start to see them more and more as well. But as he says over and over again, and he said it in this one too, for it finds its, where does it say it? Naught can stop this process, for it finds its origins in the mind of God. Naught can for long resist the magnet of God's plan. Justice and freedom in the world, and justice for all, is a part of God's plan. It's just a matter of time when humanity will finally implement its will and actually create justice and freedom for real in the world. And as always, take action. Help SOP save our planet. Thanks for listening, and we look forward to talking to you again in future videos. Have a great day.